Daniel Dubov has done it again on the first day of the Airthings Masters. He produced another crazy creative game. It's great fun. I'll show that to you in a second. First of all, a couple of announcements. If you're looking for a late Christmas present, then do check out our merch in the teespring.com store. You'll find the link down there. And we've got new designs for split rooks and also the Octopus Knight. Do check those out. You can get t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, mugs. Hopefully mine will be arriving soon so I can show you exactly what they look like. Anyway, the second thing is, if you haven't voted already for the Game of the Year, then do check out the two semi-final polls under the community tab on the main page of the channel. You'll find the link down there as well. Anyway, enough of that. On with this game. Daniel Dubov against David Anton, played in the Airthings Masters, which is the latest online tournament, part of the Champions Chess Tour organised by the Play Magnus group, and it is quite a lineup. The world champion himself is playing. He scored 4 draws on the first day, so he's got to make sure he gets his act together in order to get into the top half of the first preliminary tournament to go through to the knockout stage. Now, it's a Catalan, and here Anton decides to be very greedy and tries to hang on to that pawn. Of course, the normal moves here: Bishop e7 or c5, but he played c6 with the idea that he's trying to hang on to his extra pawn. Well, it's risky, of course, because black has neglected kingside development and white has a nice initiative. And Dubov, well, he's comfortable about giving up material, as we know from one of the games in the Game of the Year poll. So the knight already threatens to take on b5. Watch out for that pin on the long diagonal. Typical tactic in the Catalan. So a6, fine. Everything is looking solid so far. And now Dubov immediately takes steps to break up those pawns. And this turns the game into a proper gambit. Here Anton took. You can play b4, which looks a bit like a kind of mirrored King's Gambit. White certainly has compensation there, but Anton simply took on b3. And Dubov just developed very calmly. And actually, I've covered this exact position before. Those of you with long memories might recall the game between Kramnik and Giri, played in Qatar in 2014, where I was actually one of the live commentators there. And Kramnik won a fantastic game against Anish Giri. You'll find the video probably in the link down there, or maybe up there. Have a look for it. It's a brilliant game. But instead of the Queen c2 that Kramnik played, Knight e4 was played by Dubov. In fact, he's played in exactly this way before. And his opponent Shirov played Knight d5, and they had, well, an exciting game, as you might imagine. But Anton here exchanged on e4. So that bishop not only searing down this diagonal, but also looking down this diagonal towards the king side, which we know Dubov would, well, he likes that. a5. Well, that potentially gives the knight a square on a6. Queen c2, there we go, looking down the diagonal and looking at that pawn on c6. h6 stops bishop h7. Rook fc1, piling up on that pawn. Thing is, you don't want to take it too soon, because that would actually kind of liberate black's pieces. You need fine judgment here. Bishop f6 played. Of course, if knight d7, then we are going to take on c6, and that knight would certainly have sufficient support. But Anton plays bishop f6 to challenge that knight. Fair enough. And, well, Dubov doesn't need to make his next move, although it's not exactly clear how white is going to make progress here. As I said, you don't really want to take here because that would lead to a lot of pieces being exchanged, and I don't think white has any significant advantage there. Indeed, you've got to watch out for a pin on the c-file. But knight g4 is certainly more in the spirit of the game. Dubov is looking to knock out that very important dark-squared bishop. Now, if bishop takes, then there's a pin. That's no good on the d-file. Could play knight a6. That leads to, well, different kinds of things. But Anton decides to keep that precious bishop, and that leads to interesting complications. The rook is threatened, but also pawn to f5. So it's at this point that you really have to be switched on because the tactics are starting. And remember, this is a rapid play game. 15 minutes on the clock plus 10 seconds per move. f4. Well, that's necessary. And here, Anton could just duck back with the bishop and then knight e5 and, well, interesting compensation for white. But instead, Anton played f5. So this introduces just incredible complications now. If pawn takes bishop, queen takes pawn, you don't need to recapture the piece immediately. And black will take back one of the pieces and should be comfortable enough. But after f5, here is where Dubov played a move which was, well, just threw the game into chaos. Pawn to d5. This position with so many pieces on prise, and the black bishop as well, makes me think of what Tal once said. You can only take one piece at a time. So how would you play here with black? Not so easy. Which piece do you take? Or do you not take any pieces at all? Well, let's start off by seeing what would happen if this pawn is taken. By the way, the whole idea of this is just to set the bishop off. If e takes d5, definitely not good, because then bishop takes f5. And those bishops look amazing. What about c takes d5? Well, this is less clear. After this, bishop d3, and then, well, black can take that knight, let's say here. Queen c7. Well, all we can say is that white has very good compensation. But white is how many pawns down? 3 pawns down. It's a crazy position. It's also possible to take here with the pawn, which would open this up. With best play, black probably should be okay, but, well, Anton decided he wanted to take a piece instead. Fair enough. And here, if f takes g5, then this is better for black. But that wasn't Dubov's idea. He took on e6. So now this is a piece sacrifice. If the bishop drops back, then queen takes pawn. White has compensation instead. Anton played bishop f6, wants to exchange pieces. But that does leave his king a little more exposed. Nevertheless, black is a piece up. Not very good at the moment. They're, a bit blocked in. But still. So what does white have? Well, that fantastic bishop. Just steaming down the long diagonal. That's pretty nice, even though there's a pawn on f6, but that can't be protected by another pawn. So that bishop is just waiting in the wings. And of course, that wonderful pawn on e6. Supported by another pawn. So that's quite formidable. And it's still very difficult for black to bring these minor pieces into the game. Well, it comes into the game on a6, but it's not the most threatening square. And rook takes pawn. I like it that Dubov basically just continues playing normal moves. You know, this isn't checkmates in a few moves. It's just long-term compensation, and that takes real daring to play these kind of sacrifices. And here, for example, well, I mean, black has many moves. You know, you could go for a queen exchange. What's interesting is that in this position, in fact, even in the endgame, white has pretty decent compensation just because of that protected passed pawn. That bishop can't be exchanged off. Black's minor pieces, well, they're not that great. It's just superb compensation for white. Anton played h5. I don't know, it feels like a slightly funny move. Just feels like the king is a little bit looser after that. Queen f3, attacks the h-pawn. Queen h7, rook d1. Turning towards the d file. Of course, that is a big threat, so black has to challenge the d on the d file. And simply rook a1, just protecting that one. Queen h6. Okay, so this was Anton's idea. He's given his queen a little avenue out of the position. King f2, very calm move. Rook d5 from Anton seems reasonable. You know, you want to take pressure off the the d file. Rook takes, pawn takes, and here Dubov makes a mistake. In fact, he has a winning continuation here. Can you spot it? Rook takes knight. Queen takes. So now white is a rook down, but this is just too strong. Threat to play e7. Can't do much about this. And once the rook moves away, well, there's queen f7 check. So it's a winning position. The best that black can do is just give up that rook. But with two extra pawns and, well, an overwhelming position, then, you know, white has a winning position there. Instead, Dubov played rook a5, which turns out very well, but actually, at this point, Anton could have played knight c5 and brought the knight into e4, and, well, let's just say, I mean, it's still very complicated, but black would be in the game. That knight on e4 would certainly protect that weakling on f6 and always give black some counterplay. But after rook a5, instead of knight c5, d4 played. Now, short of time, Anton must have thought that this little sequence of moves would give him, well, let's say a draw, just opening up the king. But he'd obviously overlooked the strength of this simple retreat. After queen f3, in fact, that holds everything for white. When I say holds, basically white has a winning position now. I mean, the endgame, for example, I mean, this is winning for white. That pawn can be controlled or managed by the king if it advances. So queen d2 played, attacking the rook. Rook takes, and, well, white is just winning this. If here Anton took on b2, if queen d1 check, well, a vain hope, I can't speak properly, to try and, you know, ram that pawn through. But, well, after this, basically, white is going to get there first, and, well, mate follows shortly. So queen takes bishop. And now, well, with such an overwhelming position, it's not going to last long. And Dubov duly did the biz. Here's how the game finished. Just some mopping up now. Check. Check. And rook d4. And, well, mate is going to follow shortly with queen and rook. No big surprise. Well, as I said, another really entertaining game from Daniel Dubov. He finished the day with 2.5 out of 4. In fact, there were 5 players on 2.5. Magnus was on 2. But all to play for in this preliminary tournament before they move on to the knockout stages. Play begins at 1500 hours Central European time. So do check out the live commentary from the official site and on Chess24 and, well, various other sites as well. More from the Airthings Masters coming up soon. Don't forget to vote for the Game of the Year as well. Thanks for watching.